I was halfway through slicing into a piece of roast chicken when my phone buzzed on the corner of the table. We were having one of those uneasy Sunday dinners at my parents' place in Colorado Springs. The kind where everyone asked polite questions but barely listened to the answers. My dad was talking about a neighbor's fence. My mom was fussing over the mashed potatoes. And my sister Lauren had spent 20 minutes describing a listing she was trying to sell. I was too tired from the drive down from Denver to pretend I cared, so I kept my eyes on my plate until the phone buzzed again. I reached for it out of reflex. The caller ID read Mountain West Bank. At first I thought it was a spam alert or a routine security check. I pressed accept and lifted it to my ear. "This is Emily," a man's voice answered, steady and professional. "Hello, Emily, this is Jason Whitmore from Mountain West Bank. I need to speak with you regarding your loan account ending in F7. My fork slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the plate. Loan account. I didn't have any loan account with that bank. "I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong person. I don't have a loan with your bank." He paused, almost like he knew exactly what I would say. "According to our records, you opened a personal loan for $52,000 last December. Payments are now 45 days past due. We've attempted multiple notices." The room around me froze in place. My dad stopped talking mid-sentence. My mom straightened in her seat, eyebrows raised. Lauren kept her head down, but I saw her lips tighten. I forced myself to breathe. "I'm telling you, I never opened a loan. There must be a mistake." Jason kept the same level tone. "The documents in our system include your full name, date of birth, social security number, and signature. I wanted to confirm with you as a precaution." My dad cleared his throat loud enough for everyone to hear and gave me a look that said he had already decided I was at fault. My mom whispered something that sounded like, "Oh dear." I stood from the table because suddenly the chair felt too small, the air too heavy. I walked into the kitchen, still gripping the phone. "Jason, I'm repeating this. I did not open this loan. I have never signed anything with your bank." "I understand," he said. "Fraud does happen. I will email you the scan of the signed documents. You can review them tonight. I would also strongly suggest coming to the branch tomorrow morning so we can begin the verification process." Behind me, I heard Lauren's voice drifting from the dining room. Soft, too soft. "Sometimes people sign things at work and forget about it," she said, speaking to my parents but loud enough for me to hear. I could feel heat rising in my chest. She was trying to plant doubt before I even saw the paperwork. I lowered my voice. "Jason, can you tell me when this account was supposedly opened?" "December 20th, he said. "And a reminder notice was sent at the end of January." I swallowed hard. December 20th. I had been closing out year-end reports at my office in Denver. I had not gone anywhere near a bank. "All right, send the documents. I'll look at them tonight." He thanked me and ended the call. I stood in the kitchen staring at the microwave because I needed something to focus on. Something stable. Something that didn't feel like the floor dropping out beneath me. Footsteps approached behind me. My mom. "Honey," she said in that careful voice she used when she was hoping I wouldn't make a scene. "Are you sure you didn't forget signing something?" I turned to face her. "I'm absolutely sure." Before she could respond, Lauren appeared in the doorway. She wore one of her realtor smiles, gentle and rehearsed. It's probably some misunderstanding. Banks mix things up. Maybe it's tied to something you applied for years ago." My muscles stiffened. "Why are you so calm about this?" She shrugged, glancing toward our parents like she was afraid they might see something in her expression. "I just think there's no reason to panic over nothing." Nothing. A stranger had just told me I owed more than $50,000. My credit score, my job prospects, my entire financial history hung in the balance. I forced a tight smile at her, not trusting myself to speak. Dad's voice rang from the dining room, sharp with judgment. "Emily, come back and sit down. We need to talk about responsibility." That word responsibility always meant one thing in our family. "Emily, you're the one who's supposed to keep things together. Emily, you're the one who fixes problems. Emily, you're the steady one." And if something went wrong, it was easier for everyone to believe it was my fault than to question anyone else at the table. I stepped back towards the dining room doorway but didn't sit. Dad stared at me like he was waiting for a confession. Mom wrung her napkin in her hands. Lauren avoided eye contact. Pushing carrots around her plate, I said quietly, "Someone opened a loan under my name. I'm not making that up." Dad huffed. "Banks don't invent loans out of thin air." Lauren let out a breathy laugh, as if she were trying to lighten the moment, but it came out wrong. Sometimes these things overlap with home refinancing or credit checks. Maybe it's from that other loan. I blinked at her. What other loan? Lauren's face went still. Mom shot her a warning look. All eyebrows in tension. Dad shifted in his chair. I stepped forward. What other loan, Lauren? She spoke quickly. Nothing. Mom probably mixed something up. She's been helping with paperwork and all that. Judith straightened. I didn't mix up anything. Lauren, stop. The entire table froze again, but in a different way this time. Like everyone realized something had slipped that wasn't meant to. My voice was low and controlled. Someone tell me what you're talking about. No one answered. Dad looked away, jaw tight. Mom stared at her hands. Lauren kept her gaze locked on her plate. My phone buzzed again. An incoming email. I glanced down and saw the sender. Jason Whitmore. Documents attached. My stomach flipped. I looked up at my family. I didn't trust myself to speak without screaming or breaking or both. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair, said I have to go, and walked out before any of them could stop me. The cold night air hit me like a slap. I unlocked my car with shaking hands and sat inside with the engine off. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just listened to the blood pounding in my ears. Alone with my name, a signature that looked like mine, a date that made no sense, and a family who acted like they already knew more than they were saying. I started the car and pulled away from the house, headlights carving a path through the quiet street. I needed to get back to Denver. I needed to see those documents. I needed answers. But beneath all of that, a thought flickered. Small at first, sharp, dangerous. If this wasn't a mistake, then someone I knew had done it. That thought followed me all the way up the interstate, pressing deeper with every mile until the lights of Colorado Springs disappeared behind me, and the highway opened wide and empty ahead. I kept replaying the dinner in my mind as Denver's city lights came into view, each memory scraping against me like gravel. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, my hands were stiff from gripping the steering wheel. I sat there for a moment, feeling the quiet settle in around me, a relief after the tension in my parents' house. But the quiet also made room for something heavier, a sense that whatever was happening had deeper roots than a clerical mistake or one reckless decision made by someone I barely knew. This was personal. Inside the apartment, I dropped my keys onto the kitchen counter and opened my laptop without even taking my coat off. The email from Jason waited in my inbox. I clicked it, and there it was, a crisp PDF with my full name, social security number, address, and a neat signature that was supposed to be mine. I zoomed in until the letters blurred. The shape was right, but the pressure, the angle, the slight slant to the E, none of it was mine. It was like staring at a photograph of myself taken from far away, close enough to feel familiar but wrong in every important detail. The longer I looked, the more a different kind of clarity crept in. Whoever signed this had studied my handwriting. They had practiced. That meant it was someone who had seen my real signature up close, someone who had access to my old college forms or the box of financial papers I kept in my parents' storage room, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. My phone buzzed again. A notification from one of my credit monitoring apps. Suspicious activity detected. I opened it, and the red banner hit me like a punch. My score had dropped again. I scrolled through the alerts, and there it was. A hard inquiry from December 2022 tied to a lender in Colorado Springs. $85,000. I stared at the amount until my vision tightened. Not just one loan. Two that I had never opened. I set the phone down and pressed my palms against my forehead. A cold numbness spread through me. I tried to breathe through it, but a part of me already knew this did not begin last December. Someone had started using my identity years ago, quietly, slowly, in ways small enough that I never noticed. It felt like someone had been living behind my shadow, waiting until they needed something big. I forced myself to stand up and get a glass of water. I needed tomorrow to come. I needed answers from someone who understood the mechanics of this better than I did. For now, all I had were numbers and a sense of betrayal twisting deeper with every minute. Sleep was impossible. My mind kept circling back to the moment at dinner when my mother had looked straight at Lauren with that frightened, warning expression, the kind people use when a secret is about to slip. It had not been random. Judith rarely said anything by accident. She had revealed more in that one look than she probably intended. By sunrise, I was running on caffeine and stubbornness. I drove back to Colorado Springs because there were questions I needed answered before I walked into a bank and told a stranger my life had been hijacked. My parents' house looked the same as always. A 2-story place with white siding and a front porch that still creaked in the same spot it had when I was 7. But stepping inside felt different now, claustrophobic. Like the walls were holding a truth I had never been allowed to see. My mom was at the kitchen table with a mug of tea, flipping through her church newsletter. She looked up with a tight smile. "You came back early. I thought you would stay in Denver." I pulled out the chair across from her. "We need to talk about what happened last night." Judith set the mug down carefully, as if buying time. I could almost see her sliding into the familiar role of mediator, smoothing things over before they got messy. "Emily, things were tense. Your father overreacted. You know how he gets when finances come up." I shook my head. "Tell me about the loan in 2022. She blinked. "I don't know what you are talking about. You said something yesterday, something about another loan. Dad reacted to it." Lauren froze. This is not the moment to pretend nothing happened. Her mouth tightened. "Sometimes I forget how direct you can be." I leaned forward. "And sometimes I forget how much you hide." She flinched a little, and for a moment I thought she might actually tell me the truth. But years of practiced habits settled over her features. Lauren needed help that year. She and Ethan were having a rough time. A lot of families help each other out. What kind of help involved my name, my information, my credit? Her voice dropped, softer but sharper. "You are the stable one. Emily, you always have been. You have a good job, no dependents. You manage money well. Your sister has had challenges, and sometimes we do things to keep the family from falling apart. You are strong enough to carry it." My breath caught. Strong enough. In our house, that phrase had always meant sacrifice. It meant surrender. It meant I was expected to absorb the consequences of everyone else's mistakes because I could survive them. I stood up. "Mom, someone used my identity. Someone forged my signature. Someone ruined my credit." Judith looked down at her mug, not meeting my eyes. Her silence made something inside me splinter. The sound of footsteps drew both our attention. Lauren walked into the kitchen, still in her robe, pretending she had just woken up. "You are back," she said lightly. "Car trouble or something?" I stared at her. "Stop it." Judith tried to intervene, but I held up a hand. I turned to Lauren. "Tell me what you know about the loan in 2022. She sighed dramatically, as if she were the one being wronged. "I don't know why you are doing this so early in the morning. We all said things last night we didn't mean." I stepped closer. "Someone opened an $85,000 loan under my name 2 years ago, then another $52,000 last December. My credit is wrecked. The bank is expecting me at 9 today. I will find out everything you have done. Whether you say it now or later." Something flickered in her eyes. Frustration or fear or both. Mom spoke up, her voice trembling. "Lauren, sweetheart, just explain." Lauren crossed her arms. "Fine. Things got messy in 2022. Ethan had those tax issues, and we needed a bridge loan. I thought we could handle it quietly before anyone made a big deal out of it. And you, Emily, you never needed your credit the way we did. You don't have kids. You don't have a mortgage. You are always fine. You stole my identity. It slipped out before I could cushion it." The words filled the room. Lauren rolled her eyes. "No one stole anything. It was borrowing. Families borrow. You are making this sound criminal. Because it is." Her jaw locked. Mom started to cry quietly, hands shaking around her mug. Lauren tried again. "If you just hold off on talking to the bank until we sort out a few things, this doesn't have to go any further." A slow coldness unfolded through me. There it was. The truth she had been edging toward since last night. She wanted to manage me the same way she had managed our parents. Nudging, guilt-tripping, rewriting reality until everyone agreed she was the victim. I reached for my keys. "I am going to the bank." Lauren snapped. "Emily, you walk out that door and you will regret it." I looked back at her for a long moment. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. Outside, the morning air was sharp, almost metallic against my skin. I walked to my car with the kind of steadiness that comes when fear burns off and something colder takes its place. I drove toward the Mountain West branch with a single thought, rising above all the others. Whatever was coming next, I was finally done being the one who carried everyone else. I pulled into the parking lot a few minutes before 9. my nerves buzzing in a way that made my hands feel too small for the steering wheel. The Mountain West branch sat in a squat brick building with wide windows and a flag snapping in the wind. I sat for a moment with the engine running, staring at the glass doors. Inside those doors was the place where I would learn exactly how deep this mess went and how long ago it had begun. I took a slow breath, shut off the engine, and walked into the lobby. The air inside was warm and faintly scented with carpet cleaner. A few people stood in line at the teller windows. When I approached the reception desk, a young woman looked up with a friendly professional smile and asked how she could assist me. I told her I had an appointment with Jason Whitmore regarding a fraud concern. Her expression shifted quickly into something more cautious and sympathetic. She picked up the phone, murmured something, and nodded for me to take a seat. Jason came out a moment later, tall and slightly graying at the temples, with an expression that managed to be serious without being cold. He shook my hand, thanked me for coming, and led me into a small office with glass walls and blinds half drawn. I sat across from him, feeling the weight of everything that had happened in the last 12 hours pressing down on my shoulders. He began gently, "Emily, thank you for coming in so quickly. I know this is upsetting, but we are going to walk through everything step by step." He turned his monitor slightly toward me, careful not to overwhelm. "I want to confirm again. You did not open any loan accounts with us in December or in 2022. I told him I had not. I told him I had never signed a single document from this bank." He nodded slowly. "Then we treat this as an active fraud case. Yesterday I sent you the documents associated with the $52,000 loan. Today I want to show you the original digital signature files." He clicked through a series of screens until my name and a set of dated files appeared. My breath tightened when I saw the timestamp. December 20th at 6:43 in the evening. I had been in my Denver office that night finishing a quarterly report. I remembered because I had skipped dinner and ended up eating microwave noodles at 10:30. He clicked another set of images, showing the signature captured by the digital pad used for applications. The loops of the letters were too careful. Whoever had done it had studied my writing closely. I felt a prickling at the back of my neck, the same sensation I used to get when something was wrong and no one else seemed to notice. Jason clicked one more time. "This is the digital file from 2022. The signature looked even closer to mine, which somehow made it worse. It meant the person had practiced. It meant the person had access to my handwriting for a long time. I pressed my hands together. Did the two signatures come from the same person? Based on the analysis from our fraud team, yes, the pressure and movement patterns match." Jason hesitated, then continued. "We also have an IP log from the digital submission. The 2022 application was submitted from a location in Colorado Springs, a private residence." My stomach dropped. I did not ask for the address. I already knew where the trail was leading. He went on. "Before we proceed with the formal report, you should know that identity misuse by a known individual is typically investigated by local law enforcement. It is considered a serious matter." He paused, choosing his words. "Often these cases involve someone close to the applicant, someone with long-term access to personal documents." My pulse thudded in my ears. I forced myself to stay steady. "I grew up in Colorado Springs. My family still lives there." He nodded in understanding. "Family cases can be delicate, but the law treats them the same way as any other. You have the right to pursue this fully." As he spoke, my phone vibrated. I ignored it at first, focusing on his words, but it kept buzzing. When Jason paused to print a set of forms, I glanced down. 3 missed calls from my sister Lauren, 2 text messages from her husband Ethan, then one from my mother. No words, just a request that I call her as soon as possible. My chest tightened. Jason returned with a folder. "These are the documents we need to begin the formal fraud investigation. If you sign these declarations, we will escalate the case to our fraud department and coordinate with local authorities. It may involve reviewing old documents, verifying employment records, and confirming your whereabouts on specific dates." I signed because I had no reason not to. I signed because this was the only way out of the quicksand I had been dragged into. When I finished writing my name, Jason gathered the papers and said he would forward everything to Detective Ryan Brooks, who specialized in financial identity cases for the region. As we stood to leave, Jason said something that chilled me in a new way. "For what it is worth, Your instinct was right. The person who did this was confident. They knew exactly what they were doing. That usually means they have done it before. I drove away from the bank in a fog. My phone buzzed again and again until I finally pulled into the parking lot of a grocery store and turned off the engine. I leaned my head back against the seat and finally opened the messages. Ethan had written a long, rambling note telling me I was blowing everything out of proportion and that families were supposed to support each other. Lauren had sent a shorter message. Please stop. You are making everything worse. My mother's message was the one that made my throat ache. Emily, whatever you are doing, think about your sister. She needs you. We all do. I stared at the screen for a long time. Needing me had never meant helping me. It had always meant using me. Something in me steadied again, the way it had last night in the car. The part of me that had spent years trying to be the reasonable one was still there, but a sharper part had risen over it, refusing to be pushed aside anymore. I needed to see exactly how far this went. If 2022 was not the beginning, then what was? I opened my laptop right there in the parking lot and logged into every account I had. Savings, investments, old credit lines from grad school. I clicked through each screen slowly, forcing myself not to skim. At first, nothing looked out of place. Then I opened an account I had not used since 2017. A small savings account my father had helped me set up after college. It was mostly empty now, but something on the profile page made my breath catch. The authorized contact field listed Lauren. I had forgotten she was on that account. Forgotten or maybe never realized when it had happened. The beneficiary section listed her as well. 5 years ago, I must have filled the forms quickly, trusting my family without question. I clicked to remove her name and the confirmation box popped up. When I hit confirm, a quiet calm settled deep inside me. A small door had closed, one that should have been shut long ago. I kept going, updating passwords, removing old recovery emails that had once seemed harmless. I deleted shared access points that I had not used in a decade. Each change felt like sweeping glass from a floor I had been walking barefoot on without realizing. My phone buzzed one more time. This one was not from Lauren or Ethan or my mother. It was an alert from one of my financial apps, account flag, potential unauthorized activity. It listed a date from last spring and a withdrawal from a checking account I barely used. A withdrawal made in Colorado Springs. I sat very still, feeling the edges of everything shift. This was not a sudden crisis. It was a pattern that had been unfolding quietly behind my life for years, and I had not seen it because I had trusted the wrong people. I shut the laptop and started the car again. The morning sun was rising higher and the sky was getting clearer, but inside me something darker was forming, a certainty that this was only the beginning of what I needed to uncover. I pulled out of the parking lot with the sense that the next step would not come from a bank or a computer screen. It would come from the past, from someone who had seen the cracks long before I did. And I knew exactly who that person was. I drove toward the small neighborhood on the west side of Colorado Springs where Marlene lived, the road curving past older ranch-style houses with wide lawns and tall pines. The closer I got, the heavier the air felt, as if the truth itself had a weight I was only now strong enough to carry. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment, gathering myself. My hands rested on the steering wheel until my heartbeat slowed. Then I stepped out and walked up the familiar path to her porch. Marlene opened the door before I even knocked. She had always been like that, sensing things long before anyone said a word. She looked at my face, really looked, and her expression softened with a kind of tired understanding. "Come in," she said quietly, stepping aside so I could pass. Her living room smelled of lemon cleaner and the lavender candles she kept burning year-round. I sank into the couch while she brought 2 glasses of water and set them on the coffee table. She sat across from me, folding her hands in her lap. "I need your help," I said finally. "Something is very wrong, and I think it has been wrong for a long time." She nodded, as if she had been waiting for me to say exactly that. "Your mother called me this morning," she said. She was upset, but not in the way a mother should be when her daughter is being taken advantage of. More in the way someone reacts when they fear a secret is slipping out. I closed my eyes for a second. "Did she tell you anything?" She hesitated, then shook her head. Not clearly, but she kept saying that Lauren never meant to hurt anyone, and that family must come first. "That is when I knew you needed to come here." I leaned forward, I need to know what happened in 2022. And before that, anything you remember, anything you have heard. I feel like I have been living in a house full of locked rooms, and I never had the keys. Marlene exhaled slowly. All right, I will tell you what I know, but I want you to understand something first. Families like ours hold on to certain patterns for decades. People get very attached to stories that keep the peace, even when those stories are not true. I nodded, though a small part of me flinched at the word families. Mine had not felt like one in a long time. Your mother tries to keep everything pleasant, Marlene continued, but she has always been afraid of conflict. And your father is a man who believes leadership means never admitting weakness. That combination made your sister feel protected, sometimes too protected. She learned early that if she reached too far, someone else would catch her. My throat tightened. Did she do this to anyone else? Marlene rose and walked to a drawer in an old oak cabinet. She pulled out a worn notebook and brought it to me. Your mother kept this for a long time. I should not have it, but she left it here years ago and never asked for it back. I opened the notebook carefully. The first pages were filled with shopping lists and reminders. But a few pages in, the handwriting changed. There were notes about financial meetings, bills, and brief lines that stung harder the more I read. Lines about Lauren being overwhelmed, Lauren needing support, Lauren having potential, Lauren being sensitive, and lines about me. Emily is strong, Emily can wait, Emily will understand. Emily does not mind sacrifice. It was like being sliced open, not all at once, but slowly, line by line. I looked up at Marlene. Is this how she talked about me? She reached across the table and touched my hand. She loved you, but she also relied on you. There is a difference, and she did not always know where that line was. I swallowed. Tell me about the situation in 2004. Mom mentioned it once but brushed it off. Marlene sat back, her gaze drifting toward the window. Your mother had an old department store card she wanted to close, but she had trouble managing the paperwork. Lauren suggested helping. She filled out a new application instead of closing the old one. She used your mother's information. Your mother signed without reading it because she trusted her. When the bill came, your father was furious but decided to handle it quietly. They never wanted that story to follow Lauren. The room felt smaller, so this is not new. No, Marlene said gently. And your parents tried to protect her by carrying the consequences themselves. They convinced themselves it was kindness, but it also taught her that someone else would clean up the mess. A long silence settled between us. My mind kept circling one question. Why me? Why was I the one they thought could handle everything? Why was I the one they expected to absorb the fallout? As if reading my thoughts, Marlene spoke again. You were the dependable one, the reasonable one, the one who did not ask for help because you learned early that asking made things harder. You were easy to lean on, but easy is not fair. It never was. I looked down at the notebook again. The ink had faded in places, but the message had not. I had been cast in a role I never auditioned for, a role I did not want, a role that had cost me more than I had realized. I closed the notebook carefully. Thank you for telling me. I know this could not have been easy. She gave me a sad smile. I should have told you sooner. I worried it would cause trouble, but maybe trouble was needed. I stood and she walked me to the door. Before I stepped outside, she rested a hand on my arm. Whatever you choose to do next, do it for yourself. Not for them. Not for the version of you they expect. For the real you. The cold air met me as I walked to my car. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked the screen. A message from Carla at work saying the internal review for the senior analyst position would begin next week, and that she wanted to check in with me soon. The timing sent a thump of fear through my chest. My credit score mattered. My record mattered. If this fraud was not resolved quickly, it could cost me more than money. I sat in the driver's seat and let my head fall back against the headrest. The pieces were coming together, forming a picture I did not want but could no longer ignore. My identity had been used. Not once but twice. My family had known pieces of it. And the person who had done it was someone who shared my childhood memories and my parents' pride. I started the engine and began the drive back to Denver. My phone buzzed again, but I did not look. I knew who it was. The messages could wait. The truth could not. The sun was lowering behind the mountains by the time I reached the outskirts of the city. The sky glowed in soft pink and orange streaks, colors that usually comforted me. Today they felt like a reminder that something was ending, something I had once believed was solid. As I merged onto the highway, my mind moved ahead of me. Tomorrow I would meet with the investigator. Tomorrow the facts would begin to take shape. Tomorrow I would have to look straight at the person who had taken something from me I could never fully replace. And I knew with a sinking certainty that the hardest part had not come yet. Morning traffic slid past me as I drove back into Denver, but I barely noticed the cars. My hand stayed steady on the wheel while my thoughts moved in tight circles, sharper and heavier each time they came around. The investigator at the bank had given me the first pieces. Marlene had given me the history. But I still had to face the part of this that was mine to confront. The patterns had begun long before I ever understood them, and now they were tightening into something I could no longer step around. By the time I pulled into the parking garage at work, the sky had shifted to a flat silver, the kind that made the mountains look like faded drawings. I stood in the cold air for a moment, letting it pull me back into myself, then walked toward the glass doors of the building. My badge beeped, granting me entry. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of fear that the next review might not go so smoothly. I made it to my desk earlier than usual. The office was still quiet, just the hum of printers and the click of someone typing in the next row. I set down my bag, opened my laptop, and tried to lose myself in a spreadsheet. But my eyes kept drifting to the corner of the screen where my email notifications blinked. I forced myself not to check, not yet. I had been at my desk maybe 15 minutes when I saw Carla moving toward me. She rarely came by this early unless something was wrong or urgent. Her face wore that professional concern I had seen during layoffs and performance meetings. "Emily, can we talk in my office for a few minutes?" She said it gently, but my stomach still dropped. I followed her down the hallway, trying to keep my breathing steady. Inside her office, she closed the door and motioned for me to sit. "I want you to know something before I say anything else," she began. "You are one of the strongest analysts we have. Your work is solid and you handle pressure better than most. Compliments before bad news." My pulse picked up. She continued carefully. "As you know, the review for the senior analyst promotion is coming up, and part of that process involves routine background checks. Our security department notified me that your credit report shows some sudden changes, a significant drop, a few flagged accounts. They wanted me to check in with you." My throat felt tight, but I nodded. "I know. It is related to a fraud case. Someone used my identity. I filed with the bank yesterday. It is in process." Carla exhaled, relieved. "Good. I'm glad you are acting quickly. We can work with that as long as the case is documented. But these things take time, and I wanted you to be aware of the timeline." I could hear the unspoken words. If this was not resolved before the internal review, it could hold me back. I thanked her, promised to keep her updated, and she gave my arm a quick, supportive squeeze before sending me back to my desk. I tried to work after that, but the numbers on my screen kept drifting. Every few minutes, I would catch myself imagining my sister sitting at her kitchen table, filling out forms with my name at the top, signing with a practiced hand, submitting them as though it were nothing but a solution she deserved. Around noon, I finally gave up and drove home. I needed space to think. The sky had brightened, sunlight catching on the last patches of frost along the sidewalks. My apartment felt too quiet when I stepped inside, like the silence had grown heavier in the last day. I set my keys on the table and moved toward the small desk near the window. I opened my laptop and pulled up the loan documents again. The neat signature stared back at me, taunting. I zoomed in until I could see each stroke. My chest tightened. When you know a person for decades, you recognize the details they think they hide. The way Lauren shaped certain letters, the slight hook at the top of an L, the way she pressed harder when she wrote under stress. It was all there. Echoes of her handwriting disguised beneath my name. I closed the file and leaned back, rubbing my temples. I thought about the IP logs Jason had mentioned, the Colorado Springs location. All of it pointed in one direction. But what made my chest ache was not the evidence. It was the realization that my sister had done this believing she had the right, that my family had let her believe it. My phone buzzed again. This time it was not Lauren or my mother. It was a Denver area code I did not recognize. I answered, bracing myself. A calm voice introduced himself as Detective Ryan Brooks with the Regional Financial Crimes Unit. He said he had received my preliminary report and wanted to meet to go over a few items. His tone was steady, professional, but there was an underlying seriousness that made something inside me lock into place. He suggested the station near Capitol Hill and gave me a time for the following afternoon. After we hung up, I sat for a long moment staring at the blank wall. Moving forward meant facing every part of this. Not just the pieces that hurt, but the ones that revealed how long I had been quiet, how easily I had been overlooked, how often I had accepted roles I never wanted, because it was easier than fighting the tide. In the late afternoon, I drove to a nearby coffee shop, hoping the noise of other people might ground me. I ordered a tea and found a seat near the window. Outside, the traffic lights flicked from red to green, casting soft reflections on the glass. Inside, people talked about weekend plans and grocery lists and the weather. Their lives moved with a simplicity that made mine feel heavier. I thought back to all the small moments growing up that I had dismissed as differences in personality. The times my mother had insisted Lauren was too sensitive to handle criticism. The times my father had handed me extra chores because he said I could manage it better. The times I had been praised for patience and sacrifice, as if those were traits I should be proud to carry like stones in my pockets. Now those moments look different, reframed in a harsher light. They had built a framework my sister learned to rely on, a framework my parents enforced without realizing its weight, a system where my stability was treated as shared property. My phone vibrated on the table. Another text from Ethan, this one shorter. Let the bank handle it. No need to drag the family into trouble. It made me let out a humorless laugh. The family had been in trouble long before the bank ever called me. I finished my tea and drove home. Evening had settled in, the city lights reflecting off low clouds. Inside my apartment, the shadows felt longer somehow. I turned on a lamp and sat on the edge of the bed, letting the quiet fill the room. I pulled out the notebook Marlene had given me and opened it again. Those lines about me, written in my mother's soft looping script, stung every time I read them. Emily can wait. Emily will understand. Emily does not mind sacrifice. I traced a finger along the page and felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly. Something more certain. A recognition that I would not carry anyone else's obligation anymore. I closed the notebook and placed it in the drawer of my nightstand. When I turned off the lamp, the room filled with the soft glow of the streetlights outside. For a moment, I listened to the distant hum of traffic, steady and constant, a reminder that the world moved on no matter how heavy one person's truth became. Tomorrow, I would meet with the detective. Tomorrow, the case would take shape in a way I could not undo. Tomorrow, I would be one step closer to understanding the full reach of what had been done to me. And as I settled back against the pillows, watching the faint play of light on the ceiling, I felt the quiet resolve inside me deepen into something unshakable. I woke with a heaviness that settled over me before my eyes even opened, a sense that the day ahead carried its own gravity. I stayed still for a long moment, listening to the faint hum of traffic outside my window, letting my mind catch up to everything that had unfolded. Then I sat up, swung my feet to the floor, and forced myself into motion. There was no turning back from where this was headed. By late morning, I was driving toward a quiet corner of downtown Denver where I had agreed to meet Lauren. She had suggested a coffee shop near the park, a place she liked to use when she wanted to look composed but in control. I did not choose the place, but I chose to show up. I needed to hear her say the truth out loud, and I needed to see the face she wore when she realized I was no longer willing to bend. The parking lot was half full when I arrived. I stepped out into the crisp air and walked toward the entrance, my pulse steady but my chest tight with something colder than anxiety. Inside, the shop smelled of roasted beans and warm pastries, the kind of comfort that used to soothe me. Today it barely reached me. Lauren was already there, sitting by the window with her phone in her hand and a careful smile plastered on her face. She lifted her chin when she saw me. "You came," she said lightly as I sat across from her. "I was not sure you would." I folded my hands on the table and waited. She tapped her nails against her cup, a rhythmic, nervous pattern she probably did not realize she was doing. "So," she said after a moment, "we probably got off on the wrong foot the other day. Things got heated, but we can fix this before it gets out of hand." I stared at her, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her shift in her seat. Then I spoke. Lauren, I know about the loan in 2022. I know about the one in December. I know my information was used from a Colorado Springs address. I know someone forged my signature. And I know exactly who had access to my documents. Her jaw tightened. Emily, stop. You do not know what you are talking about. I opened my bag and set the printed scan of the signatures on the table. These are the strokes you make when you write under pressure. You press too hard on the first letter. You always have. That is not my signature. It is yours pretending to be mine. Her eyes flashed with something sharp, annoyance fighting with panic. For a moment, I saw the edge of the truth she had been holding down, but she smoothed her expression quickly. Look, she leaned in, lowering her voice. Things were difficult for us in 2022. Ethan had that tax situation and the bank would not help us. We just needed something to get through the season. You were doing fine. You always are. It made sense to use your name temporarily until we got back on our feet. I felt the words hit like a physical shove. My name temporarily, my life temporarily, my identity temporarily. I kept my voice low. You stole my information. You damaged my credit. You created debt in my name. You put my job at risk. That is not temporary. That is not family. That is a crime. She shook her head, her expression twisting into something accusatory. You always have to make things dramatic. You have no kids. You have no real bills. You make good money. You can handle this. It would ruin my career if this goes public. You cannot let that happen. Not if you care about any of us. There it was, the heart of it. The belief that I existed to absorb the impact for everyone else. The belief that my stability was community property. The belief that because I could handle things, I leaned back, feeling a kind of clarity settle into my spine. I am not carrying this for you. Not this time. Her face hardened. If you talk to the bank again, if you involve the police, you know what will happen. Mom will fall apart. Dad will blame me, and then he will blame you. We will lose everything. You will be responsible for this family breaking apart. I almost laughed. A short, sharp, broken sound. Lauren, the family broke apart when you signed my name to something you had no right to touch. This is not on me. She went silent then, her face tightening in that familiar way that meant she was losing her grip on the narrative. She glanced toward the windows, toward the cars passing by as if she could find a softer reality outside. Then her voice dropped into a lower tone. If you walk away from this, you walk away from all of us. I met her eyes. Maybe that is what needs to happen. For the first time, her confidence slipped. A faint tremble touched her mouth. She had always believed she could charm or guilt or pressure her way out of consequences. But she had never learned what to do when faced with someone who had finally stopped trying to please her. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. The gesture broke whatever composure she had left. Her voice turned brittle. Fine, do what you want, but do not expect to come back when everything falls apart. Do not expect forgiveness when Mom and Dad choose me over you. My chest tightened. Not because of the threat itself, but because I knew she believed it. She believed they would choose her. She believed they always had. And maybe she was right. I stood slowly, gathering my things. I looked at her one last time, seeing not my sister, but a woman shaped by years of indulgence and misdirection. A woman who had learned to survive by taking whatever she needed from anyone who loved her. She narrowed her eyes. You are going to regret this. I held her gaze. I already regret letting it go this far. When I stepped outside, the light had shifted. It was brighter, clearer, as if the air itself had thinned. I walked across the parking lot with steps that felt both heavy and steady, a kind of grounded weight settling through me. Halfway to my car, my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another message from Lauren, but the number was unfamiliar. I answered and heard the calm voice of Detective Ryan Brooks. Emily, I have reviewed the documents and the preliminary report forwarded by the bank. I would like you to come in tomorrow morning so we can begin formal statements and secure the digital evidence. There are several items that require your confirmation. Hearing his voice was like feeling a door click open. Not a door to comfort, but a door to truth, something solid and immovable. Of course, I said. I can be there. After we ended the call, I stood still for a moment beside my car, letting the cool air fill my lungs. My hands shook just slightly, not from fear, but from the realization that the next steps would force every hidden part of my family into the light. As I lowered myself into the driver's seat, The sun caught the edge of the windshield, splitting into sharp bands of gold. The world felt strangely quiet, like the pause before a storm finally breaks. I rested my hands on the steering wheel, knowing with absolute certainty that whatever happened next, I was not going back to the woman who stayed silent to keep everyone else comfortable. I sat for a long moment with my hands resting on the steering wheel before I finally started the engine and pulled away from the curb. The sun had climbed higher, soft gold stretching over the tops of buildings as if trying to warm a day that felt anything but warm. I drove toward the station near Capitol Hill with a steadiness I did not entirely feel. Each turn of the wheel felt like a step toward something irreversible. When I walked into the lobby of the station, the air smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant. A receptionist greeted me politely and directed me to a small conference room down the hall. The room was quiet and windowless, with a single table and 2 chairs. I sat down and clasped my hands together to keep them from shaking. A few minutes passed before the door opened and Detective Ryan Brooks stepped inside. He looked to be in his mid-40s, tall but not intimidating, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. He introduced himself again and thanked me for coming. His voice had a calmness that steadied something inside me. He set a folder on the table and sat across from me. We reviewed the loan documents first. He listened without interrupting as I explained the timeline, the signatures, the fraudulent accounts, and the strange activity I had discovered the night before. When I finished, he sat back slightly and nodded, his expression thoughtful. "These cases are more common than people realize," he said. "But most of the time, the offender is not so confident. In this situation, the person who did this clearly believed they would not be caught. That usually means they have close personal access." I felt my stomach twist. "Yes," I said quietly, "that is what scares me most." He opened the folder and slid a printed sheet toward me. "This is the IP log from the digital submission for the $85,000 loan. The address is tied to a residence in Colorado Springs. We confirm the service provider. The account holder is a member of your family." The words felt heavy, but not surprising. I stared at the page, seeing not the numbers, but the image of my childhood home. The kitchen where so many secrets had been softened under the guise of keeping peace. The detective watched my face for a reaction, but I kept my breathing steady. He continued, "I want to confirm your whereabouts on the dates in question. December of last year and early 2022. I told him everything, my work hours, my office location in Denver, the emails I had sent late at night, the meetings I had attended. He wrote as I spoke, careful and patient. When I finished, he nodded again. "Your timeline is consistent and verifiable. We will gather the rest from your employer." He paused. "There is significant evidence pointing to intentional identity misuse. The next step is to secure the digital records and prepare formal charges. Before we proceed, I need to ask whether the suspect is someone you wish to identify." The question sat in the room like a living thing. I pressed my palms together beneath the table. Every part of me already knew the answer. "Yes," I said softly. "I believe it was my sister Lauren." He did not react with surprise. Instead, he picked up his pen again. "Tell me everything that makes you certain." So I did. I told him about the forged signatures. I told him about the loan dates. I told him about how she had reacted when confronted, about the shift in her voice when she realized I was no longer willing to bend. I told him about Marlene and the notebook and the pattern that stretched back to our childhood. He listened without judgment. When I finished, he set down his pen. "Your testimony is thorough and consistent. The next steps are clear. We will need the digital logs from your devices as well. I will send instructions for that later today. Meanwhile, you should know the potential consequences. Identity misuse in this context is a serious offense. It could affect her professional license." The words struck something deep in me, not satisfaction, not vengeance. Something quieter, relief maybe, a sense that the truth was finally being named. He lifted the folder again. "There is one more thing. The application from 2022 included a note claiming you had verbally approved the loan. That is common in cases where the offender anticipates being questioned. I need to verify you never gave permission." I let out a breath. I never said anything of the sort. I never even knew about the loan. He made another note. Then he closed the folder gently. "All right. That is all we need for now. I will contact you as the case progresses." When I stepped back outside, the afternoon had shifted into a cooler light. A few people walked past the station carrying coffee cups or talking on phones, their lives moving along lines that had nothing to do with mine. I stood still on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the air fill my lungs. Something inside me felt lighter, not because any of this was over, but because I had finally stopped pretending it was not happening. I walked to my car slowly. As I reached for the handle, my phone vibrated. I almost ignored it, but the screen lit with an alert from my financial app. It showed an attempted login from an unrecognized device. My breath caught. The location was listed as Colorado Springs. For a long moment, I did not move. Then I opened the notification fully. The login had been blocked. Someone had tried to access my account and failed. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the phone in my lap. Lauren knew the walls were closing in. Or maybe Ethan knew. Or maybe both. They were scrambling. Desperate people made desperate choices, and I could feel the desperation building in the spaces between every action they took. My chest tightened. This was not simply a matter of legal procedure anymore. It was becoming a matter of pressure and consequence. I drove home with my mind circling through every scenario I could imagine. When I pulled into my apartment complex, the sky was turning the soft purples of early evening. I walked inside and set my bag down, feeling a pulse of exhaustion move through my limbs. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from my mother. It was short. "Please stop all of this before you ruin your sister's future. She said you were acting out of anger. Do not make a mistake you cannot undo." I stared at the message until my jaw clenched. Anger had nothing to do with this. Anger was a distant echo compared to the cold reality I was sitting in. If anything, I felt clarity and maybe grief. A grief for the family I had always hoped existed but never truly did. I set the phone aside and walked into the living room. The silence of my apartment wrapped around me, calm and steady. For the first time in days, I felt the smallest seed of something unfamiliar but welcome. Strength, maybe, or the beginning of it. I sat down, letting the quiet settle deeper. Tomorrow would bring more steps, more truth, more unraveling of the stories I had lived inside for far too long. And I knew there was no way to go back now. Not when the path forward finally held more honesty than anything I had left behind. I sat in the quiet of my apartment for a long time after reading my mother's message, letting the weight of her words settle the way dust settles in a room that has not been touched in years. A part of me still reacted to her tone, that familiar blend of disappointment and pressure. But another part of me, the part that had finally woken up, refused to bend under it anymore. I put the phone face down on the table and closed my eyes until my breath steadied. The next morning, I woke to a gray sky hanging low over Denver. I dressed slowly, feeling the heaviness of what the day might bring. I had a meeting scheduled with Carla after lunch, and the timing made me uneasy. I kept imagining the promotion slipping through my fingers because of a mess I never created. I kept imagining my entire life shifting under me because someone else had used my identity as carelessly as they used a pen. By late morning, my phone buzzed again. 2 missed calls from my father. 1 voicemail. I let them sit. I was not ready to hear another lecture about family loyalty or responsibility. I needed my head clear before walking into work. When I reached the office, the lobby lights reflected off marble floors and glass walls, everything polished and still. I walked toward the elevators, feeling the quiet determination that had been building in me over the last few days. In my cubicle, I tried once again to drown myself in numbers, but the columns on my screen kept blurring. My thoughts pulled toward the investigation, toward the conversation waiting for me, toward the unraveling thread of the family I had spent years trying to hold together. When noon came, Carla tapped on the side of my cubicle. She asked if I wanted to talk now instead of later. I nodded and followed her into her office. She gestured for me to sit, then closed the door behind us. She sat across from me with her hands folded neatly on her desk. "There is an update from the internal review team. Nothing major, but they wanted clarification from you." My throat tightened. Clarification about what? "Your credit report from last quarter looked completely stable. The sudden shift is the main question. As long as they receive documentation confirming a fraud investigation is underway, it should not affect your candidacy, but they will need that documentation soon." I could feel a small wave of relief move through me. I already filed with the bank. I will have the official copies by the end of the week. "Good," she said, truly sincere. She leaned back slightly. I do not know what is happening in your personal life, but I can see the strain. I hope you have support around you. Support. The word sat strangely between us. I nodded, though I did not feel it. After I left her office, I grabbed a sandwich in the break room and sat alone at the far table, picking at the bread while the hum of conversations drifted around me. People talked about weekend plans, kids' schedules, car repairs. Their voices felt distant from my world now. A world made of forged signatures and unraveling trust. My phone buzzed again. This time I checked. A text from my father. We are driving to Denver. We need to talk. I froze. My heartbeat kicked hard against my ribs. They never came to Denver unless something was serious. And they had chosen to come today. My palms grew cold. They were not coming to understand. They were coming to correct, to contain, to pressure. I left work early, unable to sit through the rest of the afternoon pretending to focus. As I drove home, the sky darkened, dragging shadows across the city like a heavy curtain. By the time I pulled into my parking lot, a familiar gray sedan was already parked near my building entrance. My father stood beside it, arms crossed. My mother sat inside the car, staring straight ahead, her hands clutched around her purse. I walked toward them slowly. Dad stepped forward first. We need to talk, he said. His voice was the same voice I had heard all my life, the voice of command, the voice that expected obedience before understanding. I stopped 3 feet away. He was tense, his jaw rigid. Mom opened her door and stepped out carefully. Her expression was already pinched with worry. Emily, we heard from Lauren. We know everything, she said, her eyes glistening in a way that had once broken me easily. I held back the instinct to soften. Tell me what you think you know. Dad took that question as defiance. He stepped forward. You are blowing this out of proportion. Lauren is terrified. She said you misunderstood what happened. She said you threatened her. I let out a slow breath. I did not threaten her. I confronted her. She forged my name. She opened loans in my identity. This is not a misunderstanding. My mother shook her head. Lauren said she only did what she thought would help the family. She was going to fix it. She just needed time. Time. Time to keep dragging me into financial disaster. Time to keep using my credit as her safety net. Time to keep borrowing pieces of my life because she felt entitled to them. Dad's voice hardened. You should have come to us first. You should not have gone to the bank. You should not involve the police. I met his stare without blinking. I tried coming to you years ago, over and over. You never listened. You protected her every time. And she learned she could take whatever she wanted because you would always shield her. Mom's voice cracked. Emily, please. You know your sister is fragile. You know she cannot handle this. And I can... That is what you mean, I said quietly. They both fell silent. For the first time, I said the truth plainly. You expect me to sacrifice because I am the one who survives sacrifice. You expect me to fix things because fixing things is all I have ever done. You expect me to bend because bending is what you built me for. But I'm not bending anymore. Mom looked like I had struck her. Dad clenched his jaw so hard I wondered if he tasted blood. He spoke through his teeth. Do you have any idea what will happen if you let this go forward? Lauren's career will be ruined. Ethan may face charges. Your mother will be destroyed. I felt the words sink into me, but they did not anchor me the way they once did. Your daughter did this. I said, not me. She took my identity. She used my credit. She risked my job. And you two helped her hide it. Mom whispered. We were trying to protect the family. You were trying to protect her. Dad took a step toward me, closer than he had been in years. His voice dropped. You will withdraw your statement. You will tell the bank this was a misunderstanding. You will not let this go any further. I stood my ground. No. The word came out steady, solid, final. He stared at me like he did not recognize the person standing in front of him. Then he said something cold enough to cut straight through me. If you do this, do not expect to come home again. The wind moved across the parking lot, brushing cold air along my neck. I felt that wind more than I felt his threat. I straightened. I am not the one who left this family. That happened long before today. Mom made a choked sound, covering her mouth. Dad looked like he wanted to argue. But something in my face must have warned him that nothing he said would change my mind. After a long moment, he turned away and walked back to the car. I watched them drive off, the red taillights glowing against the dimming sky until they disappeared. My legs felt unsteady, so I sat on the curb for a moment, breathing in the cold air, letting the silence wrap around me. My hands were trembling, but it was not fear. It was release, a long overdue release. Inside my apartment, the air felt thicker, still echoing with the confrontation. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, letting the truth settle. My family had made their choice, and for the first time, I had made mine. I went to bed that night feeling hollow, as if the confrontation in the parking lot had carved out a space inside me that nothing could fill. When morning came, I lay still for several minutes, listening to the faint hum of the city rising outside my window. I felt older somehow, as if what happened with my parents had shifted something permanent. But the day was waiting, and the fallout had only just begun. When I checked my phone, there were no messages from my family. The quiet was sharp, almost pointed. I got up, made coffee without tasting it, and tried to ground myself in small tasks. Fold a blanket, wash a dish, straighten a stack of mail, anything to settle the tremor under my ribs. By mid-morning, I forced myself to review work emails. My eyes skimmed lines without absorbing them until one message caught my attention. It was from the bank. The subject line made my breath hitch. Fraud case update. I clicked it immediately. The message explained that the preliminary findings had been sent to the licensing board for real estate professionals in Colorado. Because one of the flagged applications used a real estate certification number, they did not mention Lauren by name, but the implication was unmistakable. My heartbeat grew unsteady. It was happening. The consequences were beginning to reach her life, the one she had used mine to prop up. I sat back and closed my eyes for a moment, letting the truth settle. It did not feel like victory. It felt like the natural result of something that had been broken long before I ever tried to mend it. The rest of the morning passed in a blur until my phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail from an unknown number. I listened, and a neutral voice identified itself as the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies. They asked me to call back regarding a license review linked to the fraud case. A soft ache grew behind my ribs. Lauren's license was under investigation. The career she valued so publicly, the status she clung to, was now tied to the truth she had tried so hard to bury. Before I could process it, another notification appeared. A letter from the IRS had been delivered to an address linked to Ethan. My financial alert system had flagged it. I stared at the message, realizing the repercussions were spreading in ways even I had not anticipated. The tax issues Lauren had hinted at were not small. They were coming due. I set the phone down and let out a long breath. Their world was starting to buckle under the weight of decisions they had made, decisions they had once expected me to absorb. Around noon, I decided to step out for a walk. The air was cool, with a faint breeze carrying the smell of damp pavement from the previous night's rain. I wandered through my neighborhood, letting the rhythm of my steps steady my mind. I ended up near a small park with benches lined along a path of bare trees. I sat down, letting the quiet settle over me. I had barely sat for a minute before my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Lauren. The message was short and frantic. "Please stop this. I cannot lose everything. I will fix it. I promise. Just give me time." I stared at the screen, feeling something twist inside me. She had never apologized. Not once. Not when I confronted her. Not when our parents came to pressure me. Not even now as her life began to unravel. It was all fear of consequences, not remorse. A second message followed within seconds. "If you do not help me, everything will fall apart. You do not understand what this will do to me." There it was again, her life, her fallout, her fear. Not a single mention of what she had done to mine. I turned the phone face down on the bench. A few minutes later, the phone buzzed once more. This time, it was a text from Carla at work. She let me know the internal review team had received the fraud documentation from the bank, and that my file had been marked as victim status. She added that this would protect me during the upcoming review. My shoulders loosened for the first time all day. Relief washed over me like warm water. My career, the one thing I had built entirely on my own, was safe. But the moment of relief was brief, because almost immediately my phone rang. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. "Dad." I let it ring out. I did not have the strength to hear more ultimatums disguised as parental concern. A few seconds later, the voicemail icon appeared. I tapped it reluctantly. His voice sounded strained, tightly controlled in that way he used when holding back anger. He said my mother had barely slept. He said the family was under tremendous stress. He said I needed to remember where my loyalties lay. Then he said something that cut deeper than anything so far. "You are making this harder on us than it needs to be." I blinked at the screen. It took a moment for the meaning to land. Harder on them. Not harder on me. Not harder on the woman whose identity had been stolen. Harder on the people who had benefited from it. I stood abruptly, feeling the need to move, to shake off the weight of his words. I walked back toward home, my steps quicker now, my breath sharper. When I reached my apartment, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. The quiet pressed in from every corner. For the first time in days, I let myself feel the full ache of it. This was not just about the loans or the credit damage. It was about years of being shaped into the family solution, the family shield, the family sacrifice. It was about waking up to the truth that my role had never been chosen by me. A buzzing sound snapped me out of my thoughts. My laptop lit up with a new email. It was from the Real Estate Licensing Board. The subject line made my heart catch. Notice of license suspension pending investigation. I read the email twice. They had paused Lauren's license while the inquiry continued. They listed the fraudulent loan applications as grounds for suspicion. My breath grew shaky. The consequences were unfolding one by one, not because I acted out of revenge, but because this was what truth looked like when it finally had air. I sat back and stared at the ceiling. I had not wanted this for her. Not the collapse, not the humiliation, not the unraveling of the life she had built around half-truths. What I wanted was acknowledgement, accountability, something simple and human, something she had never offered. A soft knock at the door startled me. My chest tightened as I crossed the living room. When I opened the door, no one was there, only an envelope on the floor. I picked it up slowly. It was addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. The letters were shaky, uneven. Inside was a single page. The words were few, and they cut cleaner than any long speech. "Your sister is suffering. Please, Emily, do not destroy the family." No mention of what had been done to me. No mention of concern for my pain. Only fear for the one person they had always protected. I folded the letter and set it on the table. My hands were steady now, my heartbeat calm. A quiet clarity settled over me, deeper and firmer than anything I had felt before. Their world was shifting, mine was beginning to heal, and there was no turning back for any of us. I sat down, listening to the muffled sounds of traffic outside the window, feeling the truth of everything settle into place. Something had ended, and something else had just begun. I stayed at the table for a long while after reading my mother's letter, staring at the creases in the paper as if answers might rise from them if I looked long enough. But nothing came. No apology, no recognition, no acknowledgement of what had been taken from me. Only a plea to preserve a version of family that had never protected me in return. By late afternoon, I felt a stillness settle inside me. Not numbness, but something more like acceptance. I folded the letter, placed it gently in a drawer, and closed it. There was nothing left to fix there. Some ties do not break in a sudden snap. They dissolve slowly, thread by thread, until you finally realize the rope has been gone for years. The next few days passed quietly. I focused on work, answered questions from the fraud department, and provided the digital files Detective Brooks needed. My coworkers noticed I seemed distracted, but no one pressed. It was the kind of office where people cared without prying. I was grateful for that. One evening, as I sat reviewing a policy report at my desk, an email notification appeared. Final summary attached. Fraud case resolution. My breath caught. I opened it, scrolling through the technical language until I reached the part that made my chest loosen. Investigative conclusion. Victim not at fault. All fraudulent activity removed. Credit status reinstated. A warmth spread through me. Relief. Gratitude. Something that felt like my lungs finally expanding after weeks of shallow breathing. Before I left the building, my supervisor, Carla, found me packing up my laptop. She smiled, a genuine smile, and told me the internal review committee had completed their background checks. My promotion review was proceeding without issue. I thanked her, and she placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "I do not know what you have been carrying," she said softly, "but I want you to know you handled yourself with a strength most people never find." The words settled in me like something I had been waiting my whole life to hear. That night, as I drove home, the city lights shimmered across the windshield, a quiet reminder that the world kept moving even when your life felt paused. I pulled into my complex and climbed the stairs to my apartment. When I opened the door, I stood in the living room for a long moment, looking at the half-packed boxes I had prepared weeks ago when doubts about my future had started creeping in. I moved toward the window and looked at the dark outline of the mountains in the distance. Boulder had always been a dream, a place where I pictured myself starting fresh, somewhere quiet with trails and open sky. For the first time, it did not feel like escape. It felt like a beginning. 2 weeks later, I was standing in a small apartment in Boulder with sunlight streaming through large windows. Boxes piled neatly in the corner, the air felt clearer there, as if the wind itself carried room for new possibilities. I spent the day unpacking, finding the right place for dishes and books and linens, shaping the space into something that felt like mine. As the sun dipped low, I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, listening to the muffled sounds of neighbors settling in for the evening. The peace was unfamiliar, but in a way that made my shoulders drop and my heart steady. My phone buzzed. A call from Jason at the bank. I answered, and he told me the final documentation had been processed. My accounts were secure, my credit restored, and every fraudulent trace had been removed, the last knot inside me loosened. After we ended the call, I pulled out the small envelope I had brought from Denver. Inside was a photograph from years ago, the four of us standing in front of my parents' house. I stared at it for a long moment. Then, with surprising calm, I placed it gently in a drawer. I did not need to throw it away, but I no longer needed to carry it either. The next morning, I went for a walk along a trail near my building. The air was cool and smelled faintly of pine. I watched the sun rise over the foothills, rays spreading across the landscape in a way that made everything glow softly. For the first time in my life, I felt completely untethered from the expectations that had shaped me, and the absence of pressure felt like oxygen. Later that week, I heard from Marlene. She called in the early evening, her voice warm and steady. She told me that the truth had reached the wider family, and that everyone was finally seeing the situation clearly. She said something I had been afraid to hope for. You did what none of us were brave enough to do. You stood your ground. I am proud of you. The words made my throat tighten. I thanked her, and after we hung up, I sat quietly for a long moment, letting a soft joy settle where grief had once lived. Not long after, I received a letter from the licensing board informing me that Lauren's license had been suspended pending formal review. They did not mention prison or fines or anything dramatic. Just facts, consequences, accountability. It was not revenge. It was reality asserting itself. Days passed, then weeks. My parents did not reach out. Lauren did not either. And surprisingly, the silence felt merciful, not like abandonment, but like a door gently closing on a storm I had finally stepped out of. One Friday evening, I found myself sitting on my new balcony, overlooking the lights of Boulder. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and held a cup of tea. The air was cool against my skin. I thought about everything that had unfolded, everything that had fallen apart, and everything that had quietly started rebuilding inside me. I thought about the young version of myself, who had always believed her worth depended on keeping the peace, even when it cost her pieces of herself. I thought about the decades she spent shrinking so others could stretch. I thought about the moment she finally said no and meant it. That moment, more than anything else, had saved me. As I watched the lights flicker across the city, a sense of calm and clarity settled over me, a sense that the life ahead of me would be shaped by choice, not obligation. And if you have ever been the person who held everyone else up until you had nothing left for yourself, I hope you find that moment too. The one where you finally choose your own peace. The one where you let go of the weight that was never yours to carry. The one where your life begins again. If this story meant something to you or reminded you of your own strength, I hope you will stay, share your thoughts, and join me for the next story. There is more to tell. And I would love to have you here when the next chapter begins.